Hello, coaches. Let's talk about some inflammatory social posts which we find ourselves going through. This one is from Mr. Marcus Philly. Marcus is a old CrossFitter, longtime competitor for years. He actually was part of OPT's camp, which is actually a offshoot of CrossFit. They had some very interesting training methodologies when it came to unbroken stuff and all-out effort stuff. OPT was optimum performance training. So they had their own little niche within the CrossFit space, and Marcus was I think he was their most successful competitor from that camp. In 2012 or 13, he actually knocked me off my spot to the games by 1 point and qualified that year as an individual, and I think went on to qualify 2 more years. I believe that was his first year qualifying, but he essentially my last year competing as an individual, he knocked me out of the position for running. I know Marcus personally. I've always had good interaction with him. He's a nice guy. However, he shifted into this bodybuilding space, and he calls it functional bodybuilding. He's made quite a name for himself, makes buku dinero, lots of money, and mainly he has really fantastic genetics when it comes to his physiology, but he's also highly disciplined, so he maximizes his genetic potential. Now, some of the stuff that I don't like that Marcus has done is he's gone and attacked the CrossFit community, whether he sincerely believes the things that he says or he doesn't, and he's just saying this for attention, I'm not sure. But he has a good amount of people who will respond actively in his favor when he posts things like this, sketchy CrossFit moves or CrossFit burnt me out and now I do this. And I think those are a lot of the times have a lot of holes in the arguments that he makes. But here's a video on sketchy CrossFit moves part 3, got fed to me today. Let's go through it. It's about kettlebell swings specifically, which is funny because he puts the movement of sketchy CrossFit moves part 3 of he does a double overhead lunge with kettlebells, which is not what he talks about. But let's go over it and unpack it a bit for some context.
Sketchy CrossFit Moves, Part 3. Swinging kettlebells overhead was adopted by CrossFit to have a measurable range of motion and to cover more distance with the same weight. But it just...
Okay, so he's talking about kettlebell swings, and he's saying that we adopted a full range of motion kettlebell swing to cover more distance with the same weight. And the reason we would do that, of course, if you guys know as coaches, is an increased amount of power production. So same load, longer distance. There is a longer time associated with it too, but a longer distance is going to ideally produce a bit more power. Now, there is something to be said for the fact that there's a weightless portion of it, so you're maybe losing some of it there, but it is more time under tension in general for most people in a longer kettlebell swing. Now, does this also mean we don't do Russian swings? No. But it is a good way for us to do a different variation of a swing. It requires a bit more hip drive, and there's some technique associated with it. So there's some neurological components. So those are the values. Now, he's going to talk about his criticism of it here, but it just
doesn't make sense for most people. I rarely saw someone swinging a kettlebell overhead without bending their arms.
So I rarely saw someone swinging overhead without bending their arms and rounding their back and being inefficient. That is probably hyperbole, I'm guessing, because there's no way that he rarely saw people doing it right. In fact, all of the demonstration videos of people doing it who looked like CrossFitters, so if we go back in the video and we see like, okay, this guy looks like he's in a CrossFit gym and he's wearing CrossFit E shoes, but it looks a little too produced to be that nice. I think this is actually his gym, someone doing it. His arms are super bent for me, and I would never coach this into someone. But his overall mechanics are fine: flat back, hip drive, good flat foot, knee tracking toe. This is a CrossFitter. This is CrossFit Mafia and Brittany Kincaid. So she's got just fine back position. She's got a bent arm through the middle, but everything looks pretty good there. This is also a CrossFitter. Everything looks pretty good there. Also a CrossFitter. Everything looks pretty good there. Oh, what's this? This is a fitness influencer, and this is on some sort of workout video with a weird kettlebell, blah, blah, blah. And this is where it starts to look bad. So the funny part is all the CrossFit people that he showed had good positioning. And then he goes in to say we rarely see good positioning from CrossFitters, and shows a non-CrossFitter for the example, which is an interesting one to me. But
their
let's keep
arms,
going.
arching their low back, bending their knees, and generally compromising good position.
So he's saying he rarely sees anything other than the compromising of good position from overhead swings. And it's just, that's such a strange and bold statement. I've coached thousands of people, and are there some funky kettlebell swings? Sure. But with like 3 cues, you get people moving better. And if they can't get better in 3 cues, then you lighten their load and you move them to a Russian swing. It's a very simple process. So the other context here that's hard is he's not actually even talking about for performance. He's talking about for muscle building, because he's all about aesthetics and what you look like. So he's saying, he goes on to talk here about the kettlebell swing being designed for the glutes and hamstrings and things like that, which is true for both power production and for aesthetics, but it's not super important. It's just a different overall mechanism or a different overall thing that we're looking for in the long run.
Kettlebell swing is designed as a hinging movement to train the glutes, hamstrings, and back. You're better off.
Yes, for both aesthetics and power production, and you get more from the glutes, hamstring, and back when you have a harder hip drive. Now, is this to say that we don't do Russian swings? No, of course we do Russian swings. They're wonderful, and they're a fantastic place to go to. And there's an argument to be made for Russian swings being more beneficial because you're under more tension for longer and all these other things, because there's not that weightless bit in the middle. But it doesn't mean we don't utilize the full swing
mastering
either.
the Russian style swing. As you get stronger, build up to heavier and heavier bells, rather than trying to go higher and higher.
So I know this is a 1 and 30-second video, so you can only do so much in a social space, but it just leaves a lot to be desired, and there's 2 bold statements. The hard part about this is like the social media game is necessary. You have to essentially be antagonistic to get clicks. You don't have to, but you can. You can say something inflammatory or something controversial. It gets shared. It gets liked. You can see here there's 723, sends to other people being like, "See, I told you not to go overhead." But people don't have context for this. All this does is confuse and muddle the space and downplay something that is great, which is CrossFit and an overhead swing. Now, is there an argument to be made for doing Russian swings more? Sure. But it's not a valuable one or a valid one, really. And the better argument would be, let's just do overhead swings better. Because you're going to have the same problem in an overhead swing that you're going to have in a Russian swing. It's just going to be magnified because it's a longer range. So there's more opportunity for work. So I don't know. I don't find this very valuable to our community or even the fitness community in general. This is purely self-promotion. And I have my issues with these. And I'd happily have this conversation with Marcus too, but he is in the game of self-promotion, and hence the reason he doesn't wear clothes in all of his videos. And again, this is not like bashing Marcus. Marcus is successful and awesome and is helping tons of people. But this is, to me, kind of what's wrong with our space, is we take down other things with like thinly veiled reasoning, and our intent behind that is to sell our own product. I don't know. I think this fundamentally undermines everyone who's trying to do like positive things with getting people to move in the long run. And you can have your opinion about these, but I don't know. It's too much. Anywho, enjoy, team. There's your weekly coaching defense of.